USA Warrior Stories is a not-for-profit organization designed to record, archive, and share videos of veteran stories, to help veterans make a connection with one another and to help us all better understand their sacrifices for our freedoms.
The Army calls it basic training. It is, in fact, a time of trial, a time to separate the men from the boys.
I volunteered for the draft at 17. Had my father sign for me. I went in the military in '64, Fort Dix, New Jersey. Took my basic there. Then I went to Fort Lee, Virginia for quartermaster school and armor school. Ended up in Fort Benning, Georgia. The first CAF came into where I was stationed at in Benning, and they took over the whole hill basically. So nobody was doing anything. So we, coming home drunk one Sunday, we decided to join the first CAF. That's how I ended up with the first CAF.
The air-mobile concept of using organic Army aircraft to perform the combat functions of wheeled and tracked vehicles was carefully developed and tested in 2.5 years of intensive effort at the Army's great infantry training center, Fort Benning, Georgia.
Then we went from Benning to Charleston, South Carolina by train, and then we boarded the USS Buckner and went to Vietnam by boat. Ended up in Queen Yan. And the crazy thing of it is you know, everybody was always talking about the war. When we got to Queen Yan, they had a band waiting for us. They had newspaper people waiting for us, and I thought, well, what the hell is going on here? It's crazy. We went up to An Cay by bus. And most of us were 18, 19 years old. Here we are with rifles and people telling us they're shooting at you from this, and you know, it was kind of crazy. So we went by convoy up to An Cay, and there was nothing there, no base camp, no nothing, just nothing but jungle. So we built base camp. In the first month we did nothing but build bunkers, fill sandbags and strung wires and like that. When we built the base camp, I think it was like 6 or 7 months, we were in Operation Masher, and then Operation Crazy, where basically all of our infantry units were out in the field. I happened to be in base camp because I had just gotten shot in the arm, so they kept me back because I had wire stitches in my arm. And we were playing, like 1 o'clock in the morning, we were playing poker in the supply tent, and all hell broke loose. They hit us from the mountain. They come through the wire, and come to find out they had an officer, an NVA officer up in the cave up there that had a map of our base camp better than what we had. Then we had a signal unit that was on top of the mountain, Hong Kong Mountain. They completely wiped them out. They killed every man up there. Like 120 some odd people were killed up there. But the first big battle I was in was the Ia Drang Valley fight. And you know, being 18, 19, I was 18. Never seen a dead man or a dead person, period. And there were probably a good 1,000 bodies there when we landed there on the 3rd day. We were the unit that came in there to rescue the people that were left from the unit that went in there. And it was mayhem. We were still getting fire from the mountain there, Puchong Mountain they call it. And we basically broke the ring. They were encircled, and there was little groups here, little groups there. And when we landed there were bodies all over the LZ landing zone. And when we came in, the LZ was under fire. They were getting sniper shots, and people were shooting at us from the mountains. I mean, fire was just coming from every place. We basically landed on bodies because they were just all over the place because they had almost been overrun twice. So when we landed, we went out in the perimeter to help the people that were out there because half the units were dead or wounded, or they was wounded all over the place. So we did a lot of rescuing of bringing guys out of the woods that couldn't walk on their own. So half the day I spent bringing wounded in to the medevac to get, you know, to the LZ and stuff. But it was, for the first time, it was quite an experience. You know, the first time to see dead people and everything, that was a shock. We got into firefights because we were chasing the rear guard, as we call them. The NVA decided to break contact because between the jets and the artillery and everything, we just beat the hell out of them. But for the rest of the year, it was basically walking patrols, getting shot at, getting into firefights almost every day. My first tour, I had like less than 30 days left. I got medevaced home. We were in a big firefight. I don't remember where it was at. And I got hit in the leg. and it spun me around, and I hit a tree and fractured my hip all at the same time. And they medevaced me to the States in a C-141 in a body cast. I ended up in Valley Forge General Hospital for like 4 months because I got messed up pretty bad. I re-upped in the hospital, went back to Vietnam. I ended up in the 25th Division, and we went into places called the Iron Triangle, which was a really bad place. When I got into the 25th Division base camp, they just assigned me to a unit. I was in the 4th Battalion, 9th Infantry, outfit called the Manchus. And we did a lot of patrolling the Hobo Woods, Boilo Woods, Michelin Plantation, right near the Cambodian border. That was really a hot spot. That was one of the big areas in Vietnam, was the Iron Triangle. Anytime we got a report of where there was a VC unit, we would go and try and hunt it down. But the only time they ever fought us is on their terms, never on ours. And they'd just disappear as quick as they showed up. They'd shoot at you and disappear. They'd get you into a battle and then break battle in the middle of the night, or they just would disappear. And we didn't know because they would go back to Cambodia and we couldn't follow. You were doing patrols, going into firefights, going on patrols, going on firefights. If you got into base camp, you got lucky. And that's where the tunnel complex was. The 25th Division had built their base camp on top of the tunnel complex that the NVA had. So when we found some tunnels, I didn't want to send any guys in that were scared to go down there, so I volunteered to become a tunnel rat.
Deep tunnels with hidden entrances are found, and some rather unorthodox methods are used to examine them.
Now that I know what was down there, if I'd have known that then, I would have never gone. It is so dark down there. Flashlight go maybe 3 feet. And we went into tunnels with a flashlight and a 45, and I had a Bowie knife in my leg sheath. It was freaky, because all you had was a flashlight. There was no light down there. They ran around with candles. So it was basically you were fighting in the dark. You were basically firing, you were basically shooting at the smell or the sound more than anything, because you hardly ever saw them. And a 45, and if you fired that 45 down there, you almost blew your eardrums out, because it's so, and the tunnels were so small, I could basically only get on my hands and knees. I got into 2 firefights down there. Once with a doctor and a nurse. I happened to run over a underground hospital down there. They had doctors down. They had 3 levels down there. First level was basically for the fighting man. The second level usually ended up being classrooms, factories where they made booby traps and bombs and doctors and stuff. Third level was usually for families. They had whole families down there with the soldiers. They would cook down there. They had wells down there that they dug. And we didn't know this for quite a while until you started going in the tunnels with your bayonet or your Bowie knife, whatever you carried. Started stabbing the ground looking for the trapdoor for the next trip down. And a lot of times they would wait for you with punji stakes. If you went head first, they would cut your throat. I've been lucky. Or if you went down butt first, they would stab you with a punji stake. I got hit on, I got my 3rd Purple Heart with the 25th, and then I went back to the States. I didn't like the States, so I went back for my 3rd tour with MACV. I was an advisor with the Arvins in the Mekong Delta.
Working through MAG, these advisors have increased in number to more than 12,000. Each is assigned to a specific activity or unit of the Army of the Republic of Vietnam, commonly referred to as ARVN.
It was a 3-man team usually. Usually it was an officer, an NCO, and a radio operator. I was a radio operator, RTO. I was basically carrying the Prick 25, keeping contact with American units, so like artillery or base commanders and stuff like that back in the safe area. Because the only thing we really didn't advise them, we were basically in the field to bring in firepower if the Arvins needed it. We were a link between our artillery or medevacs, whatever the Arvins needed. That antenna, that was like a bullseye on your vest, because they knew wherever the radio was, there was always officers there. So they knew there was the headquarters unit, so that was a main target. Especially if you put up the whip antenna, big, tall, it was like 10-foot tall antenna, so we could reach further away. But we were on one patrol where the officer and the NCO stepped on a booby trap on a landmine, so I ended up being out there by myself with the Vietnamese. So I called in medevacs and had them medevaced out and everything. I was in the field for 6 months Then they took me out of the field and put me in a what they call a TOC, Tactical Operations Center. I ran a radio there. I was on a night shift for a couple of months, and then they put me on the day shift. And then my 4th tour, I became a door gunner. I was assigned to the 71st Aviation Company, the Rattlers and Firebirds. The Rattlers were the slicks, the troop carriers, and the Firebirds were the gunships.
To protect our men who are in Vietnam and to guarantee the continued success of our withdrawal and Vietnamization programs, I have concluded that the time has come for action. But
halfway through the tour, we moved to Quang Tri, getting ready to go into Cambodia in that big lift in 71, Lam San 719. That's when we transferred ARVNs into Cambodia, trying to break the Ho Chi Minh Trail. What a fiasco that was. A lot of times we do what they call prep the LZ. In other words, they shoot the rockets and machine gun the area in the woods and everything in case they're sitting there waiting on us, which they were anyway, because they were in the bunkers or in the tunnels. So after everything was over with artillery and the rockets from the gunships and everything, they'd pop up and shoot us anyway. But we couldn't bring American troops in there. And the ARVNs, the NVA just ran all over them. They just destroyed them. There was times where we had guys climbing on the ships, we had to kick them back off because we couldn't take off. We'd have 20 guys trying to climb on the helicopter, trying to get out of there. We got lucky, we never got into real heavy fire coming out of the mountains, so we got pretty lucky. But there were certain aviation units that lost 70, 80% of their ships and crews. Well, being in slicks, the last thing I remember is just ferrying troops back and forth into Cambodia. After that, I quit. I got tired. I said, that's it, I'm not doing it no more. They had the peace talks going. When we were flying over enemy troops walking out in the open, waving at us because they knew we had orders we could not shoot at them unless they shot at us. And I thought, that's kind of ridiculous. A whole company of NVA soldiers, full combat gear, and we couldn't engage them. And I decided, I'm getting the hell out, that's it. 1971, May of 71, came out as an E5.